You are a liability to this family name, and you are out of the will, my father said, pointing a shaking finger at the door. He did not ask who the father was. He did not ask if I was okay. He just used my pregnancy as an excuse to throw me away before I could expose his crimes. I did not cry. I reached under my chair, pulled out a small gift box containing 3 years of unpaid loan notices he had forged in my name, and set it right on his placemat. Then I turned around and walked out into the snow without saying a single word. Before I tell you what was inside that box and how it destroyed his life 7 years later, drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? I want to see how far this story travels. 7 years is a long time to stay angry. But it is the exact amount of time required to build a portfolio capable of swallowing a man whole. I stood in my office, looking out at the skyline of the financial district. The glass was cold against my forehead. I was not the shivering, pregnant girl in a thrift store coat anymore. I was 29 years old, the founder of V.M. Holdings, and I specialized in a very specific sector of the market: distressed debt. I bought bad loans from banks that were tired of chasing deadbeats, and I turned those deadbeats into profit. I walked back to my desk and tapped the spacebar. The screen woke up, displaying a spreadsheet that I had been building for 6 months. It was not a hit list. It was a balance sheet. At the top was G-Build, my father's construction company. The numbers were bleeding red. Gavin had always been good at shaking hands and terrible at managing cash flow. He had over-leveraged himself on 3 commercial projects that went nowhere. And now, the interest was eating him alive. He thought he was fighting a bad economy. He thought he was just having a run of bad luck with the regional banks. He had no idea that the invisible hand squeezing his windpipe was mine. I did not use magic, and I did not hack a mainframe. I simply did what any aggressive creditor would do. I called the vice presidents of the 3 community banks, holding his overdue notes. They were frustrated, exhausted by his excuses, and terrified of the default hitting their quarterly reports. I offered to take the toxicity off their books for 60 cents on the dollar. They thanked me. They signed the papers. And just like that, I became the primary owner of Gavin's debt. I scrolled down to the total. $450,000. It was not a fortune to a Wall Street hedge fund, but to a man like Gavin, who leveraged his reputation to lease his luxury car. It was enough to bury him. He was drowning, and I was the only one holding a life preserver. My intercom buzzed. It was my lawyer, a man I paid very well to be the face of my operation so my father would not see mine until it was too late. He told me Gavin had responded to the pressure. He was asking for a meeting to know if V.M. Holdings was interested in a restructuring deal. I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the expression of a hunter who just heard the trap snap. Gavin was arrogant. He would assume V.M. Holdings was some faceless corporate entity he could charm or swindle, just like he had swindled everyone else his entire life. He would think he could walk into a room, flash his teeth, sign a paper, and kick the can down the road for another year. I told my lawyer to set it up. I told him to offer a lifeline, but to emphasize that the window closed in 48 hours. I needed him to panic. I grabbed my coat. The acquisition phase was over. The liquidation was about to begin. I drove to the meeting location in silence. The radio was off. I needed to hear my own thoughts because, for 7 years, I had let his voice drown them out. People ask why I never fought back sooner. They assume I ran away because I was a scared pregnant girl who could not handle the pressure of single motherhood. That is the story Gavin tells at his country club. He plays the heartbroken father whose wild daughter disappeared into the night. But that was not why I left. I did not leave because of the baby. I left because of the signature. I was 18 years old when he made me the corporate secretary of G-Build. He told me it was a formality, a way to build my resume. I was naive. I trusted him. He put a stack of papers in front of me and told me to sign. I signed. I did not know I was signing personal guarantees for high-risk commercial loans that he had already defaulted on in his mind. He used my clean credit history as a fresh vein to tap when his own ran dry. When the notices started coming, I tried to ask him about them. He laughed. He told me I was hysterical. He told me to focus on my little life and let the men handle the business. I remembered the day I tried to rent an apartment 3 months after I left. I was 6 months pregnant, wearing a coat that did not button anymore, standing in a leasing office that smelled like stale coffee and floor wax. I had the deposit money. I had a letter from my employer. But the leasing agent looked at her computer screen, then looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. She told me she could not rent to me. She told me my credit report was a disaster. I ended up sleeping in my car for 2 weeks before I found a landlord who took cash under the table. I spent those nights shivering, promising my unborn daughter that her mother was not a failure. I was not a deadbeat. I was a victim of identity theft, and the thief was the man who was supposed to protect me. That is why I was there. That is why simply bankrupting him was not enough. There is a concept I think about often called the thief of dignity. You can steal someone's money, and they can earn it back. You can steal their property, and they can buy new things. But when you steal their name, when you use their identity to cover your own incompetence, you are stealing their dignity. You are forcing them to walk through the world with a mark on their forehead that says, untrustworthy, while you walk around spotless. Gavin spent 7 years telling the world I was the mistake. He let the family believe I was the one who was bad with money. He let me carry the shame of his greed. If I just take his company, he will spin it. He will tell everyone he was a victim of a hostile takeover, a martyr crushed by the economy. He will keep his dignity. I cannot allow that. I need his signature again. But this time, I do not want him to sign a guarantee. I want him to sign a confession. I want him to put his name on a document that admits, legally and irrevocably, that he is a fraud. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was an email from his lawyer stating that his client was requesting a clause that protected his personal vehicle from any future liquidity events. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound in the quiet car. He was worried about his Mercedes while he was about to lose his soul. I pulled into the parking garage of the law firm and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I did not look like the girl who slept in her car anymore. I looked like the woman who owned the parking garage. The conference room adjacent to mine was soundproofed, but the high-definition video feed on my monitor picked up every rustle of silk and every arrogant clearing of a throat. I sat in the dark, watching the screen. I was not hacking anything. I owned the shell company that rented this suite. On the long mahogany table in the main boardroom, I had placed a sleek laptop facing the empty chairs. The webcam was active, a small green light glowing steadily. I had told his lawyer it was for silent partners in Zurich to observe the proceedings. Gavin walked in first. He had not changed much in 7 years, though the stress lines around his eyes were deeper, and his suit looked a little too loose, as if he were shrinking inside his own skin. But the swagger was still there. He threw his coat onto a chair with the careless energy of a man who believes he is about to get away with murder. Behind him walked Justin. Seeing him on the screen sent a jolt of ice through my veins. My ex-boyfriend, the father of the child Gavin had forced me to hide. Justin had aged poorly. He looked soft, his face puffy with the kind of bloat that comes from too many expense account dinners. He was carrying Gavin's briefcase, playing the loyal lieutenant. It was pathetic. He had traded his own child for a mid-level management position in a failing company. Gavin mocked the office space, calling it a waste of money designed to make venture capitalists feel important. He sat down at the head of the table, ignoring the open laptop. He did not even look at the green light. To him, technology was just a tool for people beneath him. Justin asked if they were sure VM Holdings was legitimate, noting that we had moved fast with no due diligence. Gavin snapped back, telling him to stop sweating. He claimed we were not looking at the books, but at the brand. He believed the G-Build name still meant something. He explained his plan. Take the liquidity injection, pay off the immediate fires, and in 6 months, refinance again. I leaned closer to my screen. There it was. The confession. He was not planning to fix the business. He was planning to cycle the debt. He was a junkie looking for his next fix. Gavin turned to his lawyer and demanded that $50,000 be moved to a Cayman account once the wire hit. He refused to lose the deposit on his lake house just because suppliers were whining about invoices. When his lawyer warned him to wait for the counterparty, Gavin scoffed. He laughed, a dry, hacking sound, and said this reminded him of his daughter. He mocked how I used to worry about permits and budgets. When Justin said my name, Gavin's voice dropped an octave. He told him not to say my name. He called me weak. He said I could not handle the pressure of the life he built. He speculated that I was probably waiting tables in some dive bar in Ohio, blaming him for my failures. He called me a bad asset. I stared at his pixelated face. A bad asset. A write-off. He did not see a daughter. He saw a line item that did not return a profit. My hand hovered over the microphone button. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that the waitress he was mocking currently owned the building he was sitting in, but I stopped myself. Screaming is for victims. Executioners stay quiet until the blade drops. I checked the time. My lawyer was standing in the hallway, waiting for my signal. Gavin was comfortable now. He felt safe. He felt superior. He was exactly where I needed him to be. I texted my lawyer to send him in. My lawyer, Marcus, entered the room with the silence of a man who knows exactly how the game ends. He did not apologize for the wait. He did not offer a handshake. He simply placed a heavy leather binder in the center of the mahogany table. Gavin did not even look at him. He pulled the binder closer, flipping past the first 20 pages of legal definitions with the impatience of an addict reaching for a needle. He was looking for one thing: the disbursement schedule. He wanted to see the number, He found the figure on page 4. $450,000. He smiled, noting that it cleaned the slate with the regional banks. Marcus remained standing and told him the line of credit was contingent on the signature. Gavin pulled a gold fountain pen from his jacket pocket. It was a Mont Blanc, probably bought on credit 3 years ago. He unscrewed the cap and hovered over the signature line. Then, for a split second, the instincts of a lifelong con artist kicked in. He hesitated. He flipped back a page, his eyes scanning the dense paragraphs of Clause 14. My heart hammered against my ribs. Clause 14 was the kill switch. Gavin asked about the clause regarding default triggering immediate acceleration. He was reading. He was not supposed to read. Marcus checked his watch. He did not look nervous. He looked bored. He told Mr. Hall that the wire transfer window for the liquidity injection closed at 4 p.m. sharp. That was 4 minutes from now. He tapped the face of his watch and explained that if they missed the window, the funds would sit in escrow over the weekend, and they would have to re-underwrite the terms on Monday. Interest rates went up that morning. The deal might change. It was a beautiful lie. There was no wire window. I controlled the money. I could send it at midnight if I wanted to. But Gavin did not know that. Gavin knew he had payroll checks bouncing tomorrow. He knew his Mercedes was scheduled for repossession on Monday morning. The greed fought the caution in his eyes. I watched it happen in high definition. The fear of waiting 3 days of facing a weekend without cash overpowered his survival instinct. He snapped that Monday was too late and agreed to sign immediately. He turned the page back. He pressed the nib of the pen to the paper. The ink flowed. He signed his name with a flourish. Large and looping. The signature of a man who thought he was important. He commanded Justin to witness. Justin signed below him, eager to please, eager to get his cut. They had no idea what they had just done. In commercial law, the nuclear option is a confession of judgment, banned in many states for consumer loans because it's brutally predatory. But in New York commercial lending, it's fair game. By signing it, Gavin didn't just take a loan. He waived trial, counsel, notice everything. He basically handed me a trigger and pre-authorized me to pull it. Gavin smugly closed the binder, told Marcus to praise the smart choice, and demanded wire confirmation. He thought he'd bought 6 more months to bleed the company, but the ink was dry. The trap was shut. And I stopped hiding. I walked in wearing a tailored charcoal suit. Not the thrift store coat I disappeared in 7 years ago. The room went dead. Gavin looked up, irritated, then recognized me. The color drained from his face. I told him to sit. Justin protested it was a private meeting. And I calmly told them they were meeting VM. Holdings Valerie Marie. I asked if they seriously hadn't checked the LLC filing so desperate for cash they never looked at who was signing the check. Gavin tried to recover. Buying his debt made me his partner. He claimed. The contract gave him 6 months before payment. He tapped the binder like a trophy. I told him the ink was dry on a fraudulent document. I slid a manila envelope to him. Inside were dated, high-resolution photos from a Newark repossession yard taken yesterday showing the Caterpillar excavators and cranes he'd listed as collateral were already repossessed. I quoted the clause. The borrower warrants the collateral is in their possession and lien-free. He'd pledged assets he didn't own. Default wasn't in 6 months. It was immediate seconds after signing. I turned to Marcus. Execute. He explained that the confession of judgment allowed instant judgment on default, and he'd already e-filed the affidavit with the county clerk. I looked Gavin in the eye. I didn't sue him. He waived that right. The judgment was entered. VM. Holdings now had liens on his bank accounts, investments, and house. Justin yelled it was illegal. I said it was commercial law, and it was done. Garnishments were already being served, accounts frozen, cards dead, and the repo truck was headed for the Mercedes. Gavin collapsed, suddenly small, and tried to play the father card. I told him he was my father when he forged my signature, ruined my credit, and left me sleeping in a car. He wasn't a father, he was a bad investment. And I'd just liquidated him. Then Justin stood smiling. He revealed the backup plan. A process server handed me an ex parte custody order, effective immediately, granting Justin temporary sole custody of our daughter Lily. The order relied on an affidavit Gavin signed that morning, calling me mentally unstable and dangerous enough for the judge to act without a hearing. Gavin watched me with pure malice. If he couldn't get my money, he'd destroy my life. Justin offered a deal. Unfreeze Gavin's accounts, hand back the company, and maybe he'd drop custody otherwise. Lily was leaving that day. They thought they'd checkmated me. They hadn't. I asked Marcus about the retainer. Justin confirmed he'd paid his custody lawyer $15,000 and held up the check. I read the routing number and told him it was drawn on Gavin's personal account at First City Bank, an account I'd frozen 4 minutes ago. That check would bounce. His lawyer wouldn't file a single motion. He'd drop Justin before sunset. Justin's smile died. I told Gavin he'd just admitted to perjury in front of 3 witnesses. Marcus, an officer of the court, was obligated to report it. The arrogance vanished. All that was left was fear. No money, no leverage, no lawyer, and a perjury investigation incoming. I told them to leave before security threw them out. Justin crumpled the custody papers, muttered he was done, and walked out. Gavin stayed a moment, waiting for mercy. I gave none. I told him to go, so he shuffled out quietly. A man who'd sold his soul and got nothing back.